Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 1. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, the performance of Umrah is an expiation for the sins committed between it and the previous one. And the reward of Hajj Mabrur, the one accepted by Allah, is nothing except paradise. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 2. Narrated by Ibn Jurayj, Ikrimah bin Khalid asked Ibn Umar about performing Umrah before Hajj. Ibn Umar replied, there is no harm in it. Ikrimah said, Ibn Umar also said, the Prophet had performed Umrah before performing Hajj. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 3. Narrated by Ikrimah bin Khalid, I asked Ibn Umar the same, as above. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 4. Narrated by Mujahid, Ursa bin Zubair and I entered the mosque of the Prophet, and saw Abdullah bin Umar sitting near the dwelling place of Aisha, and some people were offering the duha prayer. We asked him about their prayer and he replied that it was a heresy. He, Ursa, then asked him how many times the Prophet had performed Umrah. He replied, 4 times, one of them was in the month of Rajab. We disliked to contradict him. Then we heard Aisha, the mother of faithful believers, cleaning her teeth with siwak in the dwelling place. Ursa said, O mother of the believers! Don't you hear what Abu Abdurrahman is saying? She said, what does he say? Ursa said, he says that Allah's Apostle performed 4 Umrah and one of them was in the month of Rajab. Aisha said, may Allah be merciful to Abu Abdurrahman. The Prophet did not perform any Umrah except that he was with him, and he never performed any Umrah in Rajab. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 5. Narrated by Ursa bin Zubair, I asked Aisha, whether the Prophet had performed Umrah in Rajab. She replied, Allah's Apostle never performed any Umrah in Rajab. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 6. Narrated by Qatada, I asked Anas how many times the Prophet had performed Umrah. He replied, 4 times. 1 Umrah of Hudaybiyah in Dhi al-Quwayta when the pagans hindered him, 2. Umrah in the following year in Dhi al-Quwayta after the peace treaty with them, the pagans, 3. Umrah from al-Jayrana where he distributed the war booty. I think he meant the booty of the battle of Hunan. I asked, how many times did he perform Hajj? He, Anas, replied, once. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 7. Narrated by Qatada, I asked Anas, about the Prophet's Umrah, and he replied, the Prophet performed Umrah when the pagans made him return, and Umrah of al-Hudaybiyah, the next year, and another Umrah in Dhi al-Quwayta, and another Umrah in combination with his Hajj. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 8. Narrated by Hammam, the Prophet performed 4 Umrah, 3, in Dhi al-Quwayta except the 1 Umrah which he performed with his Hajj, his Umrah from al-Hudaybiyah, and the one of the following year, and the one from al-Jayrana where he distributed the booty of the battle of Hunan, and another Umrah with his Hajj. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 9. Narrated by Abu Ishaq, I asked Masruq, Atta, and Mujahid, about the Umrah of Allah's Apostle. They said, Allah's Apostle had performed Umrah in Dhi al-Quwayta before he performed Hajj. I heard al-Bara bin Azib saying, Allah's Apostle had performed Umrah in Dhi al-Quwayta twice before he performed Hajj. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 10. Narrated by Atta, I heard Ibn Abbas saying, Allah's Apostle asked an Ansari woman, Ibn Abbas named her but Atta forgot her name, what prevented you from performing Hajj with us? She replied, we have a camel and the father of so and his son, i.e. her husband and her son, rode it and left 1 camel for us to use for irrigation. He said, to her, perform Umrah when Ramadan comes, for Umrah in Ramadan is equal to Hajj, in reward, or said something similar. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 11. Narrated by Aisha, we set out along with Allah's Apostle shortly before the appearance of the new moon, crescent, of the month of Dhul-Hijjah, and he said to us, whoever wants to assume ihram for Hajj may do so, and whoever wants to assume ihram for Umrah may do so. Hadn't I brought the hadi, animal for sacrificing, with me, I would have assumed ihram for Umrah. Aisha added, so some of us assumed ihram for Umrah while the others for Hajj. I was amongst those who assumed ihram for Umrah. The day of Arafat approached and I was still menstruating. I complained to the Prophet about that, and he said, abandon your Umrah, undo and comb your hair, and assume ihram for Hajj. When it was the night of Hasba, he sent Abdurrahman with me to At-Tan'im, and I assumed ihram for Umrah, and performed it, in lieu of my missed Umrah. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 12. Narrated by Amr bin Aus, Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr told me that the Prophet had ordered him to let Aisha ride behind him and to make he perform Umrah from At-Tan'im. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 13. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, the Prophet and his companions assumed ihram for Hajj, and none except the Prophet and Talha had the hadi with them. Ali had come from Yemen and he had the hadi with him. He, Ali, said, I have assumed ihram with an intention like that of Allah's Apostle has assumed it. The Prophet ordered his companions to intend the ihram with which they had come for Umrah, to perform the tawaf of the Kaaba, and between Safa and Marwa, to get their hair cut short and then to finish their ihram, with the exception of those who had the hadi with them. They asked, shall we go to Mina and the private organs of some of us are dribbling, if we finish ihram and have sexual relations with our wives? The Prophet heard that and said, had I known what I know now, I would not have brought the hadi. If I did not have the hadi with me I would have finished my ihram. Aisha got her menses and performed all the ceremonies of Hajj, except the tawaf. So when she became clean from her menses, and she had performed the tawaf of the Kaaba, she said, O Allah's Apostle, you, people, are returning with both Hajj and Umrah, and I am returning only with Hajj. So, he ordered Abdurrahman bin Abu Bakr to go with her to At-Tan'im. Thus she performed Umrah after the Hajj in the month of Dhul-Hijjah. Suraka bin Malik bin Jusham met the Prophet at Al-Aqaba, Jamrat al-Aqaba, while the latter was stoning it, and said, O Allah's Apostle, is this permissible only for you? The Prophet replied, no, it is forever, i.e. it is permissible for all Muslims to perform Umrah before Hajj. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 14. Narrated by Aisha, we set out with Allah's Apostle shortly before the appearance of the new moon of Dhul-Hijjah, and he said, whoever wants to assume ihram for Umrah may do so, and whoever wants to assume ihram for Hajj may do so. Had not I brought the hadi with me, I would have assumed ihram for Umrah. Some of the people assumed ihram for Umrah while others for Hajj. I was amongst those who had assumed ihram for Umrah. I got my menses before entering Mecca, and was menstruating till the day of Arafat. I complained to Allah's Apostle about it. He said, abandon your Umrah, undo and comb your hair, and assume ihram for Hajj. So, I did that accordingly. When it was the night of Hasba, day of departure from Mina, the Prophet sent Abdurrahman with me to At-Tan'im. The sub-narrator adds, he, Abdurrahman, let her ride behind him. And she assumed ihram for Umrah in lieu of the abandoned one. Aisha completed her Hajj and Umrah, and no hadi, sadaqah, charity, or fasting was obligatory for her. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 15. Narrated by Al-Aswad, that Aisha said, O Allah's Apostle, the people are returning after performing the two nashuks, i.e. Hajj and Umrah, but I am returning with one only. He said, wait till you become clean from your menses and then go to At-Tan'im, assume ihram, and after performing Umrah, join us at such and such a place. But it, i.e. the reward if Umrah, is according to your expenses or the hardship, which you will undergo while performing it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 16. Narrated by Aisha, we set out assuming the ihram for Hajj in the months of Hajj towards the sacred precincts of Hajj. We dismounted at Sarif and the Prophet said to his companions, whoever has not got the hadi with him and likes to make it as Umrah, he should do it, but he who has got the hadi with him should not do it. The Prophet and some of his wealthy companions had the hadi with them, so they did not finish ihram after performing the Umrah. The Prophet came to me while I was weeping. He asked me the reason for it. I replied, I have heard of what you have said to your companions and I cannot do the Umrah. He asked me, what is the matter with you? I replied, I am not praying. He said, there is no harm in it as you are one of the daughters of Adam and the same is written for you as for others. So, you should perform Hajj and I hope that Allah will enable you to perform the Umrah as well. So, I carried on till we departed from Mina and halted at Al-Muhassab. The Prophet called Abdurrahman and said, go out of the sanctuary with your sister and let her assume ihram for Umrah, and after both of you have finished the tawaf I will be waiting for you at this place. We came back at midnight and the Prophet asked us, have you finished? I replied in the affirmative. He announced the departure and the people set out for the journey and some of them had performed the tawaf of the Kaaba before the morning prayer, and after that the Prophet set out for Medina. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 17. Narrated by Safwan bin Ya'la bin Umayyah, from his father who said, a man came to the Prophet while he was at Jirana. The man was wearing a cloak which had traces of kaluk or safra, a kind of perfume. The man asked the Prophet, what do you order me to perform in my Umrah? So, Allah inspired the Prophet divinely and he was screened by a place of cloth. I wished to see the Prophet being divinely inspired. Umar said to me, come. Will you be pleased to look at the Prophet while Allah is inspiring him? I replied in the affirmative. Umar lifted one corner of the cloth and I looked at the Prophet who was snoring. The sub-narrator thought that he said, the snoring was like that of a camel. When that state was over, the Prophet asked, where is the questioner who asked about Umrah? Put off your cloak and wash away the traces of kaluk from your body and clean the safra, yellow color, and perform in your Umrah what you perform in your Hajj, i.e. the tawaf round the Kaaba and the Sa'i between Safa and Marwa. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 18. Narrated by Hisham ibn Urwa, from his father who said, while I was a youngster, I asked Aisha the wife of the Prophet, what about the meaning of the statement of Allah? Verily, the mountains, as Safa and Al-Marwa, are among the symbols of Allah. So, it is not harmful if those who perform Hajj or Umrah of the house, Kaaba at Mecca, to perform the going, tawaf, between them. 2.158, I understand, from that there is no harm if somebody does not perform the tawaf between them. Aisha replied, no, for if it were as you are saying, then the recitation would have been like this, it is not harmful not to perform tawaf between them. This verse was revealed in connection with the ангիր who used to assume the ihram for the idol manat which was put beside a place called Qudayd, and those people thought it not right to perform the tawaf of As-Safa and Al-Marwa. When Islam came, they asked Allah's apostle about that, and Allah revealed, verily, the mountains, As-Safa and Al-Marwa are among the symbols of Allah. So, it is not harmful of those who perform Hajj or Umrah of the house, Kaaba at Mecca, to perform the going, tawaf, between them. 2.158, Sufyan and Abu Muawiyah added from Hisham, from Aisha the Hajj or Umrah of the person who does not perform the going, tawaf, between As-Safa and Al-Marwa is incomplete in Allah's sight. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 19. Narrated by Ismail, Abdullah bin Abu Awfa said, Allah's apostle performed Umrah and we too performed Umrah along with him. When he entered Mecca he performed the tawaf of Kaaba, and we too performed it along with him, and then he came to the as-Safa and al-Marwa, i.e. performed the sa'i, and we also came to them along with him. We were shielding him from the people of Mecca lest they may hit him with an arrow. A friend of his asked him, i.e. Abdullah bin Awfa, did the Prophet enter the Kaaba during that Umrah? He replied in the negative. Then he said, what did he, the Prophet, say about Khadijah? He, Abdullah bin Awfa, said, he said, give Khadijah the good tidings that she will have a palace made of kisab in paradise and there will be neither noise nor any trouble in it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 20. Narrated by Amr bin Dinar, we asked Ibn Umar whether a man who had performed the tawaf of the Kaaba but had not performed the tawaf between as-Safa and al-Marwa yet, was permitted to have sexual relation with his wife. He replied, the Prophet arrived at Mecca, and circumambulated the Kaaba 7 times and then offered a 2-rak'at prayer behind Maqam Ibrahim and then performed the going, tawaf, between as-Safa and al-Marwa, 7 times, and verily, in Allah's apostle you have a good example. And we asked Jabir bin Abdullah, the same question, and he replied, he should not go near her till he has finished the going, tawaf, between as-Safa and al-Marwa. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 21. Narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, I came to the Prophet at al-Bayda while his camel was kneeling down and he asked me, have you intended to perform the Hajj? I replied in the affirmative. He asked me, with what intention have you assumed ihram? I replied, I have assumed ihram with the same intention as that of the Prophet. He said, you have done well. Perform the tawaf of the Kaaba and the sa'i between as-Safa and al-Marwa and then finish the ihram. So, I performed the tawaf around the Kaaba and the sa'i between as-Safa and al-Marwa and then went to a woman of the tribe of Qais who cleaned my head from lice. Later I assumed the ihram for Hajj. I used to give the verdict of doing the same till the caliphate of Umar, who said, if you follow the holy book then it orders you to remain in the state of ihram till you finish from Hajj. If you follow the Prophet then he did not finish his ihram till the hadi, sacrifice, had reached its place of slaughtering, Hajj al-Quran. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 22. Narrated by al-Aswad, Abdullah the slave of Asma bint Abu Bakr, told me that he used to hear Asma, whenever she passed by al-Hajjan, saying, may Allah bless his apostle Muhammad. Once we dismounted here with him, and at that time we were traveling with light luggage, we had a few riding animals and a little food ration. I, my sister, Aisha, Zubair and such persons performed Umrah, and when we had passed our hands over the Kaaba, i.e. performed tawaf round the Kaaba and between as-Safa and al-Marwa, we finished our ihram. Later on we assumed ihram for Hajj the same evening. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 23. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, whenever Allah's apostle returned from a ghazwa, Hajj, or Umrah, he used to say takbir thrice at every elevation of the ground and then would say, none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, he is one and has no partner. All the kingdoms is for him, and all the praises are for him, and he is omnipotent. We are returning with repentance, worshipping, prostrating, and praising our Lord. He has kept up his promise and made his slave victorious, and he alone defeated all the clans of non-believers. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 24. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, when the Prophet arrived at Mecca, some boys of the tribe of Bani Abdul Muttalib went to receive him, and the Prophet made one of them ride in front of him and the other behind him. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 25. Narrated by Ibn Umar, whenever Allah's apostle left for Mecca, he used to pray in the mosque of Ash-Shajra, and when he returned to Medina, he used to pray in the middle of the valley of Dhul Hulayfa and used to pass the night there till morning. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 26. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet never returned to his family from a journey at night. He used to return either in the morning or in the afternoon. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 27. Narrated by Jabir, the Prophet forbade going to one's family at night, on arrival from a journey. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 28. Narrated by Humayd, Anas said, whenever Allah's apostle returned from a journey, he, on seeing the high places of Medina, would make his she-camel proceed faster, and if it were another animal, even then he used to make it proceed faster. Narrated Humayd that the Prophet used to make it proceed faster out of his love for Medina. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 29. Narrated by Anas, as above, but mentioned the walls of Medina instead of the high places of Medina. Al-Harith bin Umar agrees with Anas. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 30. Narrated by Abu Ishaq, I heard Al-Bara saying, the above verse was revealed regarding us, for the Ansar on returning from Hajj never entered their houses through the proper doors but from behind. One of the Ansar came and entered through the door and he was taunted for it. Therefore, the following was revealed. It is not righteousness that you enter the houses from the back, but the righteous man is he who fears Allah, obeys his order and keeps away from what he has forbidden, so, enter houses through the proper doors. 2.189. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 31. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, traveling is a kind of torture as it prevents one from eating, drinking, and sleeping properly. So, when one's needs are fulfilled, one should return quickly to one's family. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 27, Hadith number 32. Narrated by Zayd bin Aslam, from his father, I was with Ibn Umar on the way to Mecca, and he got the news that Safiyyah bint Abu Ubaid was seriously ill. So, he hastened his pace, and when the twilight disappeared, he dismounted and offered the Maghrib and Isha prayers together. Then he said, I saw that whenever the Prophet had to hasten when traveling, he would delay the Maghrib prayer and join them together, i.e. offer the Maghrib and the Isha prayers together. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 33. Narrated by Nafi, when Abdullah bin Umar set out for Mecca intending to perform Umrah, at the time of afflictions, he said, if I should be prevented from reaching the Kaaba, then I would do the same as Allah's Apostle did, so I assume the Ihram for Umrah as Allah's Apostle assumed the Ihram for Umrah in the year of Hudaybiyah. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 34. Narrated by Nafi, that Ubaydullah bin Abdullah and Salim bin Abdullah informed him that they told Ibn Umar when Ibn Zubair was attacked by the army, saying there is no harm for you if you did not perform Hajj this year. We are afraid that you may be prevented from reaching the Kaaba. Ibn Umar said, we set out with Allah's Apostle and the non-believers of Quraysh prevented us from reaching the Kaaba, and so the Prophet slaughtered his hadi and got his head shaved. Ibn Umar added, I make you witnesses that I have made Umrah obligatory for me. And, Allah willing, I will go, and then if the way to Kaaba is clear, I will perform the tawaf, but if I am prevented from going to the Kaaba, then I will do the same as the Prophet did while I was in his company. Ibn Umar then assumed Ihram for Umrah from Dhul Hulayfa and proceeded for a while and said, the conditions of Umrah and Hajj are similar, and I make you witnesses that I have made Umrah and Hajj obligatory for myself. So, he did not finish the Ihram till the day of Nahr, slaughtering, came, and he slaughtered his hadi. He used to say, I will not finish the Ihram till I perform the tawaf, one tawaf on the day of entering Mecca, i.e. of Safa and Marwa for both Umrah and Hajj. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 35. Narrated by Nafi, some of the sons of Abdullah told him, i.e. Abdullah, if he had stayed, and not performed Hajj that year. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 36. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, Allah's apostle was prevented from performing Umrah, therefore, he shaved his head and had sexual relations with his wives and slaughtered his hadi and performed Umrah in the following year. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 37. Narrated by Salim, Abdullah, bin Umar used to say, is not the following of the tradition of Allah's apostle sufficient for you? If any one of you is prevented from performing Hajj, he should perform the tawaf of the Kaaba and between As-Safa and Al-Marwa and then finish the Ihram, and everything will become legal for him which was illegal for him during the state of Ihram, and he can perform Hajj in a following year, and he should slaughter a hadi or fast in case he cannot afford the hadi. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 38. Narrated by Al-Miswar, Allah's apostle slaughtered the hadi before he had his head shaved, and then he ordered his companions to do the same. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 39. Narrated by Nafi, that Abdullah and Salim said to Abdullah bin Umar, you should not go for Hajj this year. Abdullah bin Umar replied, we set out with the Prophet to Mecca for performing Umrah, and ye infidels of Quraysh prevented us from reaching the Kaaba. Allah's apostle slaughtered his bud, camels for sacrifice, and got his head shaved. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 40. Narrated by Nafi, when Abdullah bin Umar set out for Mecca with the intentions performing Umrah in the period of afflictions, he said, if I should be prevented from reaching the Kaaba, then I would do the same as we did while in the company of Allah's apostle. So, he assumed the Ihram for Umrah, since the Prophet had assumed the Ihram for Umrah in the year of Al-Hudaybiyah. Then Abdullah bin Umar thought about it and said, the conditions for both Hajj and Umrah are similar. He then turned towards his companions and said, the conditions of both Hajj and Umrah are similar, and I make you witnesses that I have made the performance of Hajj obligatory for myself along with Umrah. He then performed one tawaf, between As-Safa and Al-Marwa, for both of them, i.e. Hajj and Umrah, and considered that to be sufficient for him and offered a hadi. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 41. Narrated by Abdurrahman bin Abu Layla, Kabi bin Ujayra said that Allah's apostle said to him, Kabi, perhaps your lice have troubled you. Kabi replied, yes. O Allah's apostle. Allah's apostle said, have your head shaved and then either fast 3 days or feed 6 poor persons or slaughter 1 sheep as a sacrifice. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 42. Narrated by Kabi bin Umrah, Allah's apostle stood beside me at Al-Hudaybiyah and the lice were falling from my head in great number. He asked me, have your lice troubled you? I replied in the affirmative. He ordered me to get my head shaved. Kabi added, this holy verse, and if any of you is ill, or has ailment in his scalp, 2.196, etc. was revealed regarding me. The Prophet then ordered me either to fast 3 days, or to feed 6 poor persons with 1 farak, 3 sas, of dates, or to slaughter a sheep, etc., sacrifice, whatever was available. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 43. Narrated by Abdullah bin Maqal, I sat with Kabi bin Ujayra and asked him about the fidyah. He replied, this revelation was revealed concerning my case especially, but it is also for you in general. I was carried to Allah's apostle and the lice were falling in great number on my face. The Prophet said, I have never thought that your ailment, or struggle, has reached to such an extent as I see. Can you afford a sheep? I replied in the negative. He then said, fast for 3 days, or feed 6 poor persons each with half a sa of food. 1 sa equals 3 kilograms approximate. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 44. Narrated by Abdurrahman bin Abu Layla, reporting the speech of Kabi bin Umrah, Allah's apostle saw him, i.e. Kabi, while the lice were falling on his face. He asked him, have your lice troubled you? He replied in the affirmative. So, he ordered him to get his head shaved while he was at Al-Hudaybiyah. At that time they were not permitted to finish their ihram, and were still hoping to enter Mecca. So, Allah revealed the verses of Al-Fatiha. Allah's apostle ordered him to feed 6 poor persons with 1 farak of food, or to slaughter 1 sheep, as a sacrifice, or to fast for 3 days. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 45. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle said, whoever performs Hajj to this house, Kaaba, and does not approach his wife for sexual relations nor commits sins, while performing Hajj, he will come out as sinless as a newly born child, just delivered by his mother. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 28, Hadith number 46. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, whoever performs Hajj to this Kaaba and does not approach his wife for sexual relations nor commit sins, while performing Hajj, he will come out as sinless as a newborn child, just delivered by his mother. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 47. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abu Qatada, my father set out, for Mecca, in the year of Al-Hudaybiyah, and his companions assumed ihram, but he did not. At that time the Prophet was informed that an enemy wanted to attack him, so the Prophet proceeded onwards. While my father was among his companions, some of them laughed among themselves. My father said, I looked up and saw an onager. I attacked, stabbed, and caught it. I then sought my companions' help, but they refused to help me. Later, we all ate its meat. We were afraid that we might be left behind, separated, from the Prophet, so I went in search of the Prophet and made my horse to run at a galloping speed at times and let it go slow at an ordinary speed at other times, till I met a man from the tribe of Bani Ģifr at midnight. I asked him, where did you leave the Prophet? He replied, I left him at Tahan, and he had the intention of having the midday rest at As-Sakiyah. I followed the trace and joined the Prophet and said, O Allah's apostle, your people, companions, send you their compliments, and ask for Allah's blessings upon you. They are afraid lest they may be left behind, so please wait for them. I added, O Allah's apostle, I hunted an onager and some of its meat is with me. The Prophet told the people to eat it, though all of them were in the state of ihram. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 48. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abu Qatada, that his father said, we proceeded with the Prophet in the year of Al-Hudaybiyah and his companions assumed ihram, but I did not. We were informed that some enemies were at Gaika, and so we went on towards them. My companions saw an onager and some of them started laughing among themselves. I looked and saw it. I chased it with my horse and stabbed and caught it. I wanted some help from my companions, but they refused. I slaughtered it all alone. We all ate from it, i.e. its meat. Then I followed Allah's apostle lest we should be left behind. At times I urged my horse to run at a galloping speed and at other times at an ordinary slow speed. On the way I met a man from the tribe of Bani Ģifr at midnight. I asked him where he had left Allah's apostle. The man replied that he had left the Prophet at a place called Tahan, and he had the intention of having the midday rest at As-Sakiyah. So, I followed Allah's apostle till I reached him and said, O Allah's apostle, I have been sent by my companions who send you their greetings and compliments and ask for Allah's mercy and blessings upon you. They were afraid lest the enemy might intervene between you and them, so please wait for them. So he did. Then I said, O Allah's apostle, we have hunted an onager and have some of it, i.e. its meat, left over. Allah's apostle told his companions to eat the meat, although all of them were in a state of ihram. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 49. Narrated by Abu Qatada, we were in the company of the Prophet at a place called Al-Kahha, which is at a distance of 3 stages of journey from Medina. Abu Qatada narrated through another group of narrators, we were in the company of the Prophet at a place called Al-Kahha, and some of us had assumed ihram while the others had not. I noticed that some of my companions were watching something, so I looked up and saw an onager. I rode my horse and took the spear and whip, but my whip fell down, and I asked them to pick it up for me, but they said, "We will not help you by any means as we are in a state of ihram." So, I picked up the whip myself and attacked the onager from behind a hillock and slaughtered it and brought it to my companions. Some of them said, "Eat it," while some others said, "Do not eat it." So, I went to the Prophet who was ahead of us and asked him about it. He replied, "Eat it as it is halal, i.e. it is legal to eat it." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 50. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abu Qatada, that his father had told him that Allah's apostle set out for Hajj and so did his companions. He sent a batch of his companions by another route and Abu Qatada was one of them. The Prophet said to them, "Proceed along the seashore till we meet all together." So, they took the route of the seashore, and when they started all of them assumed ihram except Abu Qatada. While they were proceeding on, his companions saw a group of onagers. Abu Qatada chased the onagers and attacked and wounded a she-onager. They got down and ate some of its meat and said to each other, "How do we eat the meat of the game while we are in a state of ihram?" So, they, carried the rest of the she-onager's meat, and when they met Allah's apostle they asked, saying, "O Allah's apostle, we assumed ihram with the exception of Abu Qatada and we saw a group of onagers. Abu Qatada attacked them and wounded a she-onager from them. Then we got down and ate from its meat. Later, we said, to each other, how do we eat the meat of the game and we are in a state of ihram? So, we carried the rest of its meat." The Prophet asked, "Did any one of you order Abu Qatada to attack it or point at it?" They replied in the negative. He said, "Then eat what is left of its meat." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 51. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas, from As-Sab bin Jathama al-Laythi that the latter presented an onager to Allah's apostle while he was at Al-Abwa or at Wadan, and he refused it. On noticing the signs of some unpleasant feeling of disappointment on his, As-Sab's, face, the Prophet said to him, "I have only returned it because I am muhrim." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 52. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's apostle said, "It is not sinful of a muhrim to kill 5 kinds of animals." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 53. Narrated by one of the wives of the Prophet said, "A muhrim can kill 5 kinds of animals." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 54. Narrated by Hafsa, Allah's apostle said, "It is not sinful, of a muhrim, to kill 5 kinds of animals, namely, the crow, the kite, the mouse, the scorpion, and the rabid dog." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 55. Narrated by Aisha, Allah's apostle said, 5 kinds of animals are harmful and could be killed in the haram, sanctuary. These are, the crow, the kite, the scorpion, the mouse, and the rabid dog. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 56. Narrated by Abdullah, while we were in the company of the Prophet in a cave at Mina, when Surat wal-Mursalat were revealed and he recited it and I heard it, directly, from his mouth as soon as he recited its revelation. Suddenly a snake sprang at us and the Prophet said, "Ordered us kill it." We ran to kill it but it escaped quickly. The Prophet said, "It has escaped your evil and you too have escaped its evil." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 57. Narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, Allah's apostle called the salamander a bad animal, but I did not hear him ordering it to be killed. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 58. Narrated by Said bin Abu Said al-Makbari, Abu Shurayh, al-Ada'i said that he had said to Amr bin Sa'id when he was sending the troops to Mecca, to fight Abdullah bin Az Zubair, "O chief, Allow me to tell you what Allah's apostle said on the day following the conquest of Mecca. My ears heard that and my heart understood it thoroughly, and I saw with my own eyes the Prophet when he, after glorifying and praising Allah, started saying, Allah, not the people, made Mecca a sanctuary, so anybody who has belief in Allah and the last day should neither shed blood in it, nor should he cut down its trees. If anybody argues, that fighting in it is permissible on the basis that Allah's apostle did fight in Mecca, say to him, Allah allowed his apostle and did not allow you. Allah allowed me only for a few hours on that day, of the conquest, and today its sanctity is valid as it was before. So, those who are present should inform those who are absent, concerning this fact. Abu Shurayh was asked, what did Amr reply? He said, Amr said, O Abu Shurayh, I know better than you in this respect. Mecca does not give protection to a sinner, a murderer, or a thief. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 59. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet said, Allah has made Mecca a sanctuary, so it was a sanctuary before me and will continue to be a sanctuary after me. It was made legal for me, i.e., I was allowed to fight in it, for a few hours of a day. It is not allowed to uproot its shrubs or to cut its trees, or to chase, or disturb, its game, or to pick up its fallen things, except by a person who would announce that, what he has found, publicly. Al-Abbas said, O Allah's apostle, except al-ангիր, a kind of grass, for it is used, by our goldsmiths and for our graves. The Prophet then said, except al-ангիր. Ikrimah said, do you know what chasing or disturbing the game means? It means driving it out of the shade to occupy its place. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 60. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, on the day of the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet said, there is no more emigration from Mecca, but jihad and intentions, and whenever you are called for jihad, you should go immediately. No doubt, Allah has made this place, Mecca, a sanctuary since the creation of the heavens and the earth, and will remain a sanctuary till the day of resurrection as Allah has ordained its sanctity. Fighting was not permissible in it for anyone before me, and even for me it was allowed only for a portion of a day. So, it is a sanctuary with Allah's sanctity till the day of resurrection. Its thorns should not be uprooted and its game should not be chased, and its fallen things, should not be picked up except by one who would announce that publicly, and its vegetation, grass etc., should not be cut. Al-Abbas said, O Allah's apostle, except al-ангիր, for it is used by their blacksmiths and for their domestic purposes. So, the Prophet said, except al-ангիր. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 61. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, Allah's apostle was cupped while he was in a state of ihram. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 62. Narrated by Ibn Bu'ayna, the Prophet, while in the state of ihram, was cupped at the middle of his head at Lihajamal. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 63. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet married Ma'imunah while he was in the state of ihram, only the ceremonies of marriage were held. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 64. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, a person stood up and asked, O Allah's apostle, what clothes may be worn in the state of ihram? The Prophet replied, do not wear a shirt or trousers, or any headgear, e.g. a turban, or a hooded cloak, but if somebody has no shoes he can wear leather stockings provided they are cut short off the ankles, and also, do not wear anything perfumed with wars or saffron, and the muhrima, a woman in the state of ihram, should not cover her face, or wear gloves. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 65. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, a man was crushed to death by his she-camel and was brought to Allah's apostle, who said, give him a bath and shroud him, but do not cover his head, and do not bring any perfume near to him, as he will be resurrected reciting Talbiyah. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 66. Narrated by Abdullah bin Hunan, Abdullah bin al-Abbas and al-Miswar bin Makrama differed at al-Abway. Ibn Abbas said that a murim could wash his head, while al-Miswar maintained that he should not do so. Abdullah bin Abbas sent me to Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, and I found him bathing between the two wooden posts of the well, and was screened with a sheet of cloth. I greeted him and he asked who I was. I replied, I am Abdullah bin Hunan, and I have been sent to you by Ibn Abbas to ask you how Allah's apostle used to wash his head while in the state of Layram. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari caught hold of the sheet of cloth and lowered it till his head appeared before me, and then told somebody to pour water on his head. He poured water on his head, and he, Abu Ayyub, rubbed his head with his hands by bringing them from back to front and from front to back, and said, I saw the Prophet doing like this. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 67. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, I heard the Prophet delivering a sermon at Arafat saying, if a murim does not find slippers, he could wear cuffs, but he has to cut short the cuffs below the ankles, and if he does not find an izar, a waist sheet for wrapping the lower half of the body, he could wear trousers. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 68. Narrated by Abdullah, Allah's apostle was asked what sort of clothes a murim should wear. He replied, he should not wear a shirt, turbans, trousers, a hooded cloak, or a dress perfumed with saffron or wars, and if slippers are not available he can wear cuffs, but he should cut them so that they reach below the ankles. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 69. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet delivered a sermon at Arafat and said, whoever does not get an izar can wear trousers, and whoever cannot get a pair of shoes can wear cuffs. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 70. Narrated by Al-Bara, the Prophet assumed ihram for Umrah in the month of Dhul Qa'dah, but the pagan people of Mecca refused to admit him into Mecca till he agreed on the condition that he would not bring into Mecca any arms but sheathed. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 71. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet fixed Dhul Hulayfa as the miqat, the place for assuming ihram, for the people of Medina, and Quran al-Manatzil for the people of Najd, and Yalamlam for the people of Yemen. These mawaqit are for those people and also for those who come through these mawaqit, from places other than the above mentioned, with the intention of performing Hajj and Umrah. And those living inside these mawaqit can assume ihram from the place where they start, even the people of Mecca can assume ihram from Mecca. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 72. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, Allah's apostle entered Mecca in the year of its conquest wearing an Arabian helmet on his head, and when the Prophet took it off, a person came and said, Ibn Cattle is holding the covering of the Kaaba, taking refuge in the Kaaba. The Prophet said, kill him. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 73. Narrated by Yali, while I was with Allah's apostle there came to him a man wearing a cloak having a trace of yellowish perfume or a similar thing on it. Umar used to say to me, would you like to see the Prophet at the time when he is inspired divinely? So, it happened that he was inspired, then, and when the inspiration was over the Prophet said, to that man, do in your Umrah the same as you do in your Hajj. A man bit the hand of another man, but in that process the latter broke one incisor tooth of the former, and the Prophet forgave the latter. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 74. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, while a man was standing with the Prophet at Arafat, he fell from his mount and his neck was crushed by it. The Prophet said, wash the deceased with water and sidra and shroud him in 2 pieces of cloth, and neither perfume him nor cover his head, for Allah will resurrect him on the day of resurrection and he will be reciting Talbiyah. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 75. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, while a man was standing with the Prophet at Arafat, he fell from his mount and his neck was crushed by it. The Prophet said, "Wash the deceased with water and sidra and shroud him in 2 pieces of cloth, and neither perfume him nor cover his head, for Allah will resurrect him on the day of resurrection and he will be reciting Talbiyah." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 76. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, a man was in the company of the Prophet and his she-camel crushed his neck while he was in a state of ihram and he died. Allah's apostle said, "Wash him with water and sidra and shroud him in his 2 garments, neither perfume him nor cover his head, for he will be resurrected on the day of resurrection, reciting Talbiyah." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 77. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, a woman from the tribe of Juhana came to the Prophet and said, "My mother had vowed to perform Hajj but she died before performing it. May I perform Hajj on my mother's behalf?" The Prophet replied, "Perform Hajj on her behalf. Had there been a debt on your mother, would you have paid it or not? So, pay Allah's debt as he has more right to be paid." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 78. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, a woman from the tribe of Qatham came in the year of Hajjatul Wada of the Prophet, and said, "O Allah's apostle, my father has come under Allah's obligation of performing Hajj but he is a very old man and cannot sit properly on his mount. Will the obligation be fulfilled if I perform Hajj on his behalf?" The Prophet replied in the affirmative. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 79. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas, Al-Fadl was riding behind the Prophet and a woman from the tribe of Qatham came up. Al-Fadl started looking at her and she looked at him. The Prophet turned Al-Fadl's face to the other side. She said, "My father has come under Allah's obligation of performing Hajj but he is a very old man and cannot sit properly on his mount. Shall I perform Hajj on his behalf?" The Prophet replied in the affirmative. That happened during Hajjatul Wada of the Prophet. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 80. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet sent me to Mina with the luggage from Jam, i.e. Al-Muzdalifah, at night. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 81. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas, I came riding on my she-ass and had, just, then attained the age of puberty. Allah's apostle was praying at Mina. I passed in front of a part of the first row and then dismounted from it, and the animal started grazing. I aligned with the people behind Allah's apostle. The sub-narrator added that happened in Mina during the Prophet's Hajjatul Wada. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 82. Narrated by As-Sa'ib bin Yazid, while in the company of my parents, I was made to perform Hajj with Allah's apostle and I was a 7-year-old boy then. Fath al-Bari, p.443, Volume 4. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 83. Narrated by Al-Juwayd bin Abdurrahman, I heard Umar bin Abdul Aziz telling about As-Sa'ib bin Yazid that he had performed Hajj, while carried, with the belongings of the Prophet. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 84. Narrated by Aisha, mother of the faithful believers, I said, "O Allah's apostle, shouldn't we participate in holy battles and jihad along with you?" He replied, "The best and the most superior jihad, for women, is Hajj which is accepted by Allah." Aisha added, "Ever since I heard that from Allah's apostle I have determined not to miss Hajj." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 85. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet said, "A woman should not travel except with a dhum, her husband or a man with whom that woman cannot marry at all according to the Islamic jurisprudence, and no man may visit her except in the presence of a dhum." A man got up and said, "O Allah's apostle, I intend to go to such and such an army and my wife wants to perform Hajj. The Prophet said, to him, go along with her, to Hajj. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 86. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, when the Prophet returned after performing his Hajj, he asked Sinan al-Ansari, what did forbid you to perform Hajj? She replied, father of so and so, i.e. her husband, had 2 camels and he performed Hajj on one of them, and the second is used for the irrigation of our land. The Prophet said, to her, perform Umrah in the month of Ramadan, as it is equivalent to Hajj or Hajj with me, in reward. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 87. Narrated by Qaza'a, the slave of Ziyad, Abu Said who participated in 12 Ghazawat with the Prophet said, I heard 4 things from Allah's Apostle, or I narrate them from the Prophet, which won my admiration and appreciation. They are: 1. No lady should travel without her husband or without a dhumram for a 2 days journey. 2. No fasting is permissible on 2 days of Eid al-Fitr, and Eid al-Adha. 3. No prayer may be offered, after 2 prayers, after the Asr prayer till the sun set and after the morning prayer till the sun rises. 4. Not to travel, for visiting, except for 3 mosques, Masjid al-Haram, in Mecca, my mosque, in Medina, and Masjid al-Aqsa, in Jerusalem. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 88. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet saw an old man walking, supported by his 2 sons, and asked about him. The people informed him that he had vowed to go on foot, to the Kaaba. He said, Allah is not in need of this old man's torturing himself, and ordered him to ride. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 29, Hadith number 89. Narrated by Uqba bin Amir, my sister vowed to go on foot to the Kaaba, and she asked me to take the verdict of the Prophet about it. So, I did, and the Prophet said, she should walk and also should ride. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 91. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet said, Medina is a sanctuary from that place to that. Its trees should not be cut and no heresy should be innovated nor any sin should be committed in it, and whoever innovates in it an heresy or commits sins, bad deeds, then he will incur the curse of Allah, the angels, and all the people. See Hadith number 409, Vol 9. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 92. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet came to Medina and ordered a mosque to be built and said, O Bani Najjar, suggest to me the price of your land. They said, we do not want its price except from Allah, i.e. they wished for a reward from Allah for giving up their land freely. So, the Prophet ordered the graves of the pagans to be dug out and the land to be levelled, and the date palm trees to be cut down. The cut date palms were fixed in the direction of the Qibla of the mosque. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 93. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, I have made Medina a sanctuary between its 2, Herat, mountains. The Prophet went to the tribe of Bani Haritha and said, to them, I see that you have gone out of the sanctuary, but looking around, he added, no, you are inside the sanctuary. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 94. Narrated by Ali, we have nothing except the Book of Allah and this written paper from the Prophet, wherein is written, Medina is a sanctuary from the air mountain to such and such a place, and whoever innovates in it an heresy or commits a sin, or gives shelter to such an innovator in it will incur the curse of Allah, the angels, and all the people. None of his compulsory or optional good deeds of worship will be accepted. And the asylum, of protection, granted by any Muslim is to be secured, respected, by all the other Muslims, and whoever betrays a Muslim in this respect incurs the curse of Allah, the angels, and all the people, and none of his compulsory or optional good deeds of worship will be accepted, and whoever, freed slave, befriends, take as masters, other than his manumitters without their permission incurs the curse of Allah, the angels, and all the people, and none of his compulsory or optional good deeds of worship will be accepted. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 95. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, I was ordered to migrate to a town which will swallow, conquer, other towns and is called Yathrib, and that is Medina, and it turns out, bad persons as a furnace removes the impurities of iron. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 96. Narrated by Abu Humayd, we came with the Prophet from Tabuk, and when we reached near Medina, the Prophet said, this is Tabuk. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 97. Narrated by Abu Huraira, if I saw deers grazing in Medina, I would not chase them, for Allah's Apostle said, Medina is a sanctuary between its two mountains. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 98. Narrated by Abu Huraira, I heard Allah's Apostle saying, the people will leave Medina in spite of the best state it will have, and none except the wild birds and the beasts of prey will live in it, and the last persons who will die will be two shepherds from the tribe of Muzina, who will be driving their sheep towards Medina, but will find nobody in it, and when they reach the valley of Thaniyat al-Wada, they will fall down on their faces dead. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 99. Narrated by Abu Zuhair, I heard Allah's Apostle saying, Yemen will be conquered and some people will migrate from Medina, and will urge their families, and those who will obey them to migrate to Yemen, although Medina will be better for them, if they but knew. Sham will also be conquered and some people will migrate from Medina, and will urge their families and those who will obey them to migrate to Sham, although Medina will be better for them, if they but knew. Iraq will be conquered and some people will migrate from Medina, and will urge their families and those who will obey them to migrate to Iraq, although Medina will be better for them, if they but knew. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 100. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, verily, belief returns and goes back to Medina as a snake returns and goes back to its hole, when in danger. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 101. Narrated by Sa'd, I heard the Prophet saying, none plots against the people of Medina but that he will be dissolved, destroyed, like the salt is dissolved in water. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 102. Narrated by Usama, once the Prophet stood at the top of looked out from upon one castle amongst the castles, or the high buildings, of Medina and said, do you see what I see? No doubt, I see the spots where afflictions will take place among your houses, and these afflictions will be as numerous as the spots where raindrops fall. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 103. Narrated by Abu Bakr, the Prophet said, the terror caused by Al-Masih ad-Dajjal will not enter Medina, and at that time Medina will have 7 gates and there will be 2 angels at each gate guarding them. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 104. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, there are angels guarding the entrances, or roads, of Medina, neither plague nor ad-Dajjal will be able to enter it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 105. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, there will be no town which ad-Dajjal will not enter except Mecca and Medina, and there will be no entrance, road, of both Mecca and Medina, but the angels will be standing in rows guarding it against him, and then Medina will shake with its inhabitants thrice, i.e. 3 earthquakes will take place, and Allah will expel all the non-believers and the hypocrites from it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 106. Narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Allah's Apostle told us a long narrative about ad-Dajjal, and among the many things he mentioned, was his saying, ad-Dajjal will come and it will be forbidden for him to pass through the entrances of Medina. He will land in some of the salty barren areas, outside Medina, on that day the best man or one of the best men will come up to him and say, I testify that you are the same Dajjal whose description was given to us by Allah's apostle. Ad-Dajjal will say to the people, if I kill this man and bring him back to life again, will you doubt my claim? They will say, no. Then Ad-Dajjal will kill that man and bring him back to life. That man will say, now I know your reality better than before. Ad-Dajjal will say, I want to kill him but I cannot. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 107. Narrated by Jabir, a Bedouin came to the Prophet and gave a pledge of allegiance for embracing Islam. The next day he came with fever and said, to the Prophet, please cancel my pledge, of embracing Islam and of emigrating to Medina. The Prophet refused that request 3 times and said, Medina is like a furnace, it expels out the impurities, bad persons, and selects the good ones and makes them perfect. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 108. Narrated by Zayd bin Thabit, when the Prophet went out for the battle of Uhud, some of his companions, hypocrites, returned home. A party of the believers remarked that they would kill those hypocrites who had returned, but another party said that they would not kill them. So, this divine inspiration was revealed. Then what is the matter with you that you are divided into 2 parties concerning the hypocrites? 4.88 The Prophet said, Medina expels the bad persons from it, as fire expels the impurities of iron. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 109. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet said, O Allah! Bestow on Medina twice the blessings you bestowed on Mecca. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 110. Narrated by Anas, whenever the Prophet returned from a journey and observed the walls of Medina, he would make his mount go fast, and if he was on an animal, i.e. a horse, he would make it gallop because of his love for Medina. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 111. Narrated by Anas, the people of Bani Salama intended to shift near the mosque of the Prophet, but Allah's apostle disliked to see Medina vacated and said, O the people of Bani Salama! Don't you think that you will be rewarded for your footsteps which you take towards the mosque? So, they stayed at their old places. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 112. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, there is a garden from the gardens of paradise between my house and my pulpit, and my pulpit is on my lake fount, Al-Kothar. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 113. Narrated by Aisha, when Allah's apostle reached Medina, Abu Bakr and Bilal became ill. When Abu Bakr's fever got worse, he would recite this poetic verse: everybody is staying alive with his people, yet death is nearer to him than his shoelaces. And Bilal, when his fever deserted him, would recite, would that I could stay overnight in a valley wherein I would be surrounded by Idkir and Jalil, kinds of good-smelling grass. Would that one day I could drink the water of the Madinah, and would that the 2 mountains, Shama and Tafil, would appear to me. The Prophet said, O Allah! Curse Shaiba bin Rabi'ah and Utbah bin Rabi'ah and Umayyah bin Khalaf as they turned us out of our land to the land of epidemics. Allah's apostle then said, O Allah! Make us love Medina as we love Mecca, or even more than that. O Allah! Give blessings in our essay and our mud, measures symbolizing food, and make the climate of Medina suitable for us, and divert its fever towards Al-Jaffa. Aisha added, when we reached Medina, it was the most unhealthy of Allah's lands, and the valley of Baythan, the valley of Medina, used to flow with impure colored water. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 30, Hadith number 114. Narrated by Zayd bin Aslam, from his father, Umar said, O Allah! Grant me martyrdom in your cause, and let my death be in the city of your apostle. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 115. Narrated by Talha ben Ubaydullah, a Bedouin with unkempt hair came to Allah's apostle and said, O Allah's apostle! Inform me what Allah has made compulsory for me as regards the prayers. He replied, you have to offer perfectly the 5 compulsory prayers in a day and night, 24 hours, unless you want to pray nawafil. The Bedouin further asked, inform me what Allah has made compulsory for me as regards fasting. He replied, you have to fast during the whole month of Ramadan, unless you want to fast more as nawafil. The Bedouin further asked, tell me how much zakat Allah has enjoined on me. Thus, Allah's apostle informed him about all the rules, i.e. fundamentals, of Islam. The Bedouin then said, by him who has honored you, I will neither perform any nawafil nor will I decrease what Allah has enjoined on me. Allah's apostle said, if he is saying the truth, he will succeed, or he will be granted paradise. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 116. Narrated by Ibn Umar, the Prophet observed the fast on the 10th of Muharram, Ashura, and ordered Muslims to fast on that day, but when the fasting of the month of Ramadan was prescribed, the fasting of the Ashura was abandoned. Abdullah did not use to fast on that day unless it coincided with his routine fasting by chance. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 117. Narrated by Aisha, the tribe of Quraysh used to fast on the day of Ashura in the pre-Islamic period, and then Allah's apostle ordered Muslims to fast on it till the fasting in the month of Ramadan was prescribed, whereupon the Prophet said, he who wants to fast on Ashura may fast, and he who does not want to fast may not fast. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 118. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle said, fasting is a shield, or a screen or a shelter. So, the person observing fasting should avoid sexual relation with his wife and should not behave foolishly and impudently, and if somebody fights with him or abuses him, he should tell him twice, I am fasting. The Prophet added, by him in whose hands my soul is, the smell coming out from the mouth of a fasting person is better in the sight of Allah than the smell of musk. Allah says about the fasting person, he has left his food, drink, and desires for my sake. The fast is for me. So I will reward the fasting person for it, and the reward of good deeds is multiplied 10 times. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 119. Narrated by Abu Wail from Hudhaifa, Umar asked the people, who remembers the narration of the Prophet about the affliction. Hudhaifa said, I heard the Prophet saying, the affliction of a person in his property, family, and neighbors is expiated by his prayers, fasting, and giving in charity. Umar said, I do not ask about that, but I ask about those afflictions which will spread like the waves of the sea. Hudhaifa replied, there is a closed gate in front of those afflictions. Umar asked, will that gate be opened or broken? He replied, it will be broken. Umar said, then the gate will not be closed again till the day of resurrection. We said to Masruq, would you ask Hudhaifa whether Umar knew what that gate symbolized? He asked him and he replied Umar, knew it as one knows that there will be night before tomorrow, morning. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 120. Narrated by Sahl, the Prophet said, there is a gate in paradise called Ar-Rayyan, and those who observe fasts will enter through it on the day of resurrection and none except them will enter through it. It will be said, where are those who used to observe fasts? They will get up, and none except them will enter through it. After their entry the gate will be closed and nobody will enter through it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 121. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle said, whoever gives 2 kinds of things or property in charity for Allah's cause, will be called from the gates of paradise and will be addressed, O slaves of Allah. Here is prosperity. So, whoever was amongst the people who used to offer their prayers, will be called from the gate of the prayer, and whoever was amongst the people who used to participate in jihad, will be called from the gate of jihad, and whoever was amongst those who used to observe fasts, will be called from the gate of Ar-Rayyan, whoever was amongst those who used to give in charity, will be called from the gate of charity. Abu Bakr said, "Let my parents be sacrificed for you, O Allah's apostle. No distress or need will befall him who will be called from those gates. Will there be anyone who will be called from all these gates?" The Prophet replied, "Yes, and I hope you will be one of them." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 122. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, "When Ramadan begins, the gates of paradise are opened." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 123. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, "When the month of Ramadan starts, the gates of the heaven are opened and the gates of hell are closed and the devils are chained." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 124. Narrated by Ibn Umar, I heard Allah's Apostle saying, "When you see the crescent of the month of Ramadan, start fasting, and when you see the crescent of the month of Shawwal, stop fasting, and if the sky is overcast, and you can't see it, then regard the crescent month of Ramadan as of 30 days. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 125. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, "Whoever established prayers on the night of Qadr out of sincere faith and hoping for a reward from Allah, then all his previous sins will be forgiven, and whoever fasts in the month of Ramadan out of sincere faith, and hoping for a reward from Allah, then all his previous sins will be forgiven." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 126. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet was the most generous amongst the people, and he used to be more so in the month of Ramadan when Gabriel visited him, and Gabriel used to meet him on every night of Ramadan till the end of the month. The Prophet used to recite the Holy Quran to Gabriel, and when Gabriel met him, he used to be more generous than a fast wind, which causes rain and welfare. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 127. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, "Whoever does not give up forged speech and evil actions, Allah is not in need of his leaving his food and drink, i.e. Allah will not accept his fasting." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 128. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, Allah said, "All the deeds of Adam's sons, people, are for them, except fasting which is for me, and I will give the reward for it." Fasting is a shield or protection from the fire and from committing sins. If one of you is fasting, he should avoid sexual relation with his wife and quarreling, and if somebody should fight or quarrel with him, he should say, "I am fasting. By him in whose hands my soul is, the unpleasant smell coming out from the mouth of a fasting person is better in the sight of Allah than the smell of musk." There are two pleasures for the fasting person, one at the time of breaking his fast, and the other at the time when he will meet his Lord, then he will be pleased because of his fasting. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 129. Narrated by Alqamah, while I was walking with Abdullah he said, we were in the company of the Prophet and he said, "He who can afford to marry should marry, because it will help him refrain from looking at other women, and save his private parts from looking at other women, and save his private parts from committing illegal sexual relation, and he who cannot afford to marry is advised to fast, as fasting will diminish his sexual power." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 130. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's Apostle mentioned Ramadan and said, "Do not fast unless you see the crescent of Ramadan, and do not give up fasting till you see the crescent of Shawwal, but if the sky is overcast, if you cannot see it, then act on estimation, i.e. count Shaban as 30 days. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 131. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's Apostle said, the month can be 29 nights, i.e. days, and do not fast till you see the moon, and if the sky is overcast, then complete Shaban as 30 days. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 132. Narrated by Ibn Umar, the Prophet said, the month is like this and this. At the same time he showed the fingers of both his hands thrice, and left out one thumb on the third time. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 133. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet or Abu al-Qasim said, start fasting on seeing the crescent of Ramadan, and give up fasting on seeing the crescent of Shawwal, and if the sky is overcast, and you cannot see it, complete 30 days of Shaban. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 134. Narrated by Salama, the Prophet vowed to keep aloof from his wives for a period of 1 month, and after the completion of 29 days he went either in the morning or in the afternoon to his wives. Someone said to him, you vowed that you would not go to your wives for 1 month. He replied, the month is of 29 days. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 135. Narrated by Anas, Allah's Apostle vowed to keep aloof from his wives for 1 month, and he had dislocation of his leg. So, he stayed in a mashruba for 29 nights and then came down. Some people said, O Allah's Apostle, you vowed to stay aloof for 1 month. He replied, the month is of 29 days. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 136. Narrated by Abu Bakr, the Prophet said, the 2 months of Eid, i.e. Ramadan and Dhul Hijjah, do not decrease in superiority. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 137. Narrated by Ibn Umar, the Prophet said, we are an illiterate nation, we neither write, nor know accounts. The month is like this and this, i.e. sometimes of 29 days and sometimes of 30 days. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 138. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, none of you should fast a day or two before the month of Ramadan unless he has the habit of fasting, nawafil, and if his fasting coincides with that day, then he can fast that day. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 139. Narrated by Al-Bara, it was the custom among the companions of Muhammad that if any of them was fasting and the food was presented, for breaking his fast, but he slept before eating, he would not eat that night and the following day till sunset. Qais bin Surma al-Ansari was fasting and came to his wife at the time of iftar, breaking one's fast, and asked her whether she had anything to eat. She replied, no, but I would go and bring some for you. He used to do hard work during the day, so he was overwhelmed by sleep and slept. When his wife came and saw him, she said, disappointment for you. When it was midday on the following day, he fainted and the Prophet was informed about the whole matter and the following verses were revealed, you are permitted to go to your wives, for sexual relation, at the night of fasting. So, they were overjoyed by it. And then Allah also revealed, and eat and drink until the white thread of dawn appears to you distinct from the black thread of the night. 2.187. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 140. Narrated by Adi bin Hatim, when the above verses were revealed, until the white thread appears to you, distinct from the black thread, I took 2 hair strings, one black and the other white, and kept them under my pillow and went on looking at them throughout the night but could not make anything out of it. So, the next morning I went to Allah's Apostle and told him the whole story. He explained to me, that verse means the darkness of the night and the whiteness of the dawn. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 141. Narrated by Sal bin Sa'ud, when the following verses were revealed, eat and drink until the white thread appears to you, distinct from the black thread, and of dawn was not revealed. Some people who intended to fast, tied black and white threads to their legs and went on eating till they differentiated between the two. Allah then revealed the words, of dawn, and it became clear that meant night and day. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 142. Narrated by Aisha, Bilal used to pronounce the adhan at night, so Allah's Apostle said, carry on taking your meals, eat and drink, till Ibn Maktum pronounces the adhan, for he does not pronounce it till it is dawn. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 143. Narrated by Sal bin Sad, I used to take my suhur meals with my family and then hurry up for presenting myself for the Fajr prayer with Allah's Apostle. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 144. Narrated by Anas, Zayd bin Thabit said, we took the suhur with the Prophet. Then he stood for the prayer. I asked, what was the interval between the suhur and the adhan? He replied, the interval was sufficient to recite 50 verses of the Quran. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 145. Narrated by Abdullah, the Prophet fasted for days continuously, the people also did the same, but it was difficult for them. So, the Prophet forbade them to fast continuously for more than one day. They slid, but you fast without break, no food was taken in the evening or in the morning. The Prophet replied, I am not like you, for I am provided with food and drink, by Allah. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 146. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, take suhur as there is a blessing in it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 147. Narrated by Salama bin Alaqwa, once the Prophet ordered a person on Ashura, the 10th of Muharram, to announce, whoever has eaten, should not eat any more, but fast, and who has not eaten should not eat, but complete his fast, till the end of the day. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 148. Narrated by Aisha and Salama, at times Allah's Apostle used to get up in the morning in the state of janaba after having sexual relations with his wives. He would then take a bath and fast. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 149. Narrated by Aisha, the Prophet used to kiss and embrace his wives while he was fasting, and he had more power to control his desires than any of you. Said Jabir, the person who gets discharge after casting a look on his wife should complete his fast. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 150. Narrated by Hisham's father, Aisha said, Allah's Apostle used to kiss some of his wives while he was fasting, and then she smiled. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 151. Narrated by Zainab, daughter of Salama, that her mother said, while I was lying with Allah's Apostle underneath a woolen sheet, I got the menstruation, and then slipped away and put on the clothes, which I used to wear, in menses. He asked, what is the matter? Did you get your menses? I replied in the affirmative and then entered underneath that woolen sheet. I and Allah's Apostle used to take a bath from one water pot and he used to kiss me while he was fasting. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 152. Narrated by Aisha, at times, in Ramadan the Prophet used to take a bath in the morning not because of a wet dream and would continue his fast. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 153. Narrated by Abu Bakr bin Abdurrahman, my father and I went to Aisha and she said, I testify that Allah's Apostle at times used to get up in the morning in a state of janaba from sexual intercourse, not from a wet dream, and then he would fast that day. Then he went to Salama and she also narrated a similar thing. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 154. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, if somebody eats or drinks forgetfully, then he should complete his fast, for what he has eaten or drunk, has been given to him by Allah. Narrated Amir bin Rabi'a, I saw the Prophet cleaning his teeth with siwak while he was fasting so many times as I can't count. And narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, but for my fear that it would be hard for my followers, I would have ordered them to clean their teeth with siwak on every performance of ablution. The same is narrated by Jabir and Zayd bin Khalid from the Prophet, who did not differentiate between a fasting and a non-fasting person in this respect, using siwak. Aisha said, the Prophet said, it, i.e. siwak, is a purification for the mouth and it is a way of seeking Allah's pleasures. Atta and Qatada said, there is no harm in swallowing the resultant saliva. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 155. Narrated by Humran, I saw Uthman performing ablution, he washed his hands thrice, rinsed his mouth and then washed his nose, by putting water in it and then blowing it out, and washed his face thrice, and then washed his right forearm up to the elbow thrice, and then the left forearm up to the elbow thrice, then smeared his head with water, washed his right foot thrice, and then his left foot thrice, and said, I saw Allah's apostle performing ablution similar to my present ablution, and then he said, whoever performs ablution like my present ablution and then offers 2 rakat in which he does not think of worldly things, all his previous sins will be forgiven. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 156. Narrated by Aisha, a man came to the Prophet and said that he had been burnt, ruined. The Prophet asked him what was the matter. He replied, I had sexual intercourse with my wife in Ramadan, while I was fasting. Then a basket full of dates was brought to the Prophet and he asked, where is the burnt, ruined man? He replied, I am present. The Prophet told him to give that basket in charity, as expiation. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 157. Narrated by Abu Huraira, while we were sitting with the Prophet, a man came and said, O Allah's Apostle, I have been ruined. Allah's Apostle asked what was the matter with him. He replied, I had sexual intercourse with my wife while I was fasting. Allah's Apostle asked him, can you afford to manumit a slave? He replied in the negative. Allah's Apostle asked him, can you fast for 2 successive months? He replied in the negative. The Prophet asked him, can you afford to feed 60 poor persons? He replied in the negative. The Prophet kept silent, and while we were in that state, a big basket full of dates was brought to the Prophet. He asked, where is the questioner? He replied, I am here. The Prophet said to him, take this basket of dates, and give it in charity. The man said, should I give it to a person poorer than I? By Allah, there is no family between its, i.e. Medina's, 2 mountains who are poorer than I. The Prophet smiled till his premolar teeth became visible and then said, feed your family with it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 158. Narrated by Abu Huraira, a man came to the Prophet and said, I had sexual intercourse with my wife on Ramadan, while fasting. The Prophet asked him, can you afford to manumit a slave? He replied in the negative. The Prophet asked him, can you fast for 2 successive months? He replied in the negative. He asked him, can you afford to feed 60 poor persons? He replied in the negative. Abu Huraira added, then a basket full of dates was brought to the Prophet and he said, to that man, feed poor people with this by way of atonement. He said, should I feed it to poorer people than we? There is no poorer house than ours between its, Medina's, mountains. The Prophet said, then feed your family with it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 159. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet was cupped while he was in the state of Layram, and also while he was observing a fast. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 160. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, the Prophet was cupped while he was fasting. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 161. Narrated by Thabit al-Bunani, Anas bin Malik was asked whether they disliked the cupping for a fasting person. He replied in the negative and said, only if it causes weakness. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 162. Narrated by Ibn Abi Awfa, we were in the company of Allah's Apostle on a journey. He said to a man, get down and mix sa'ik, powdered barley, with water for me. The man said, the sun has not set yet, O Allah's Apostle. The Prophet again said to him, get down and mix sa'ik with water for me. The man again said, O Allah's Apostle. The sun. The Prophet said to him, for the third time, get down and mix sa'ik with water for me. The man dismounted and mixed sa'ik with water for him. The Prophet drank it and then beckoned with his hand, towards the east, and said, when you see the night falling from this side, then a fasting person should break his fast. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 163. Narrated by Aisha, Hamza bin Amr al-Islami said, O Allah's Apostle, I fast continuously. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 164. Narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, Hamza bin Amr al-Islami asked the Prophet, should I fast while traveling? The Prophet replied, you may fast if you wish, and you may not fast if you wish. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 165. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, Allah's Apostle set out for Mecca in Ramadan and he fasted, and when he reached Al-Qadid, he broke his fast and the people, with him, broke their fast too. Abu Abdullah said, Al-Qadid is a land covered with water between Usfan and Qudayd. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 166. Narrated by Abu ad-Darda, we set out with Allah's Apostle on one of his journeys on a very hot day, and it was so hot that one had to put his hand over his head because of the severity of heat. None of us was fasting except the Prophet and Ibn Rawaha. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 167. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, Allah's Apostle was on a journey and saw a crowd of people, and a man was being shaded by them. He asked, what is the matter? They said, he, the man, is fasting. The Prophet said, it is not righteousness that you fast on a journey. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 168. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, we used to travel with the Prophet and neither did the fasting persons criticize those who were not fasting, nor did those who were not fasting criticize the fasting ones. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 169. Narrated by Taus, Ibn Abbas said, Allah's Apostle set out from Medina to Mecca and he fasted till he reached Usfan, where he asked for water and raised his hand to let the people see him, and then broke the fast, and did not fast after that till he reached Mecca, and that happened in Ramadan. Ibn Abbas used to say, Allah's Apostle, sometimes, fasted and, sometimes, did not fast during the journeys, so whoever wished to fast could fast, and whoever wished not to fast, could do so. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 170. Narrated by Nafi, Ibn Umar recited the verse, they had a choice either to fast or to feed a poor person for every day, and said that the order of this verse was cancelled. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 171. Narrated by Aisha, sometimes I missed some days of Ramadan, but could not fast in lieu of them except in the month of Shaban. Said Yahya, a sub-narrator, she used to be busy serving the Prophet. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 172. Narrated by Abu said, the Prophet said, "Isn't it true that a woman does not pray and does not fast on menstruating? And that is the defect, a loss, in her religion." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 173. Narrated by Aisha, Allah's Apostle said, "Whoever died and he ought to have fasted, the missed days of Ramadan, then his guardians must fast on his behalf." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 174. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, a man came to the Prophet and said, "O Allah's Apostle, my mother died and she ought to have fasted 1 month, for her missed Ramadan. Shall I fast on her behalf?" The Prophet replied in the affirmative and said, "Allah's debts have more right to be paid." In another narration a woman is reported to have said, "My sister died." Narrated Ibn Abbas, a woman said to the Prophet, "My mother died and she had vowed to fast but she didn't fast." In another narration Ibn Abbas is reported to have said, a woman said to the Prophet, "My mother died while she ought to have fasted for 15 days. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 175. Narrated by Umar bin al-Khattab, Allah's Apostle said, "When night falls from this side and the day vanishes from this side and the sun sets, then the fasting person should break his fast." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 176. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abi Awfa, "We were in the company of the Prophet on a journey and he was fasting, and when the sun set, he addressed somebody, 'O so-and-so, get up and mix sa'ik with water for us.' He replied, 'O Allah's Apostle, will you wait till it is evening?' The Prophet said, 'Get down and mix sa'ik with water for us.' He replied, 'O Allah's Apostle, if you wait till it is evening.' The Prophet said again, 'Get down and mix sa'ik with water for us.' He replied, 'It is still daytime.' 1. The Prophet said again, 'Get down and mix sa'ik with water for us.' He got down and mixed sa'ik for them. The Prophet drank it and then said, 'When you see night falling from this side, the fasting person should break his fast.' Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 177. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abi Awfa, "We were traveling with Allah's Apostle and he was fasting, and when the sun set, he said to someone, 'Get down and mix sa'ik with water for us.' He replied, 'O Allah's Apostle, will you wait till it is evening?' The Prophet again said, 'Get down and mix sa'ik with water for us.' He replied, 'O Allah's Apostle, it is still daytime.' The Prophet said again, 'Get down and mix sa'ik with water for us.' So, he got down and carried out that order. The Prophet then said, 'When you see night falling from this side, the fasting person should break his fast,' and he beckoned with his finger towards the east. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 178. Narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd, Allah's Apostle said, "The people will remain on the right path as long as they hasten the breaking of the fast." Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 179. Narrated by Ibn Abi Awfa, "I was with the Prophet on a journey, and he observed the fast till evening. The Prophet said to a man, 'Get down and mix sa'ik with water for me.' He replied, 'Will you wait till it is evening?' The Prophet said, 'Get down and mix sa'ik with water for me. When you see night falling from this side, the fasting person should break his fast.' Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 180. Narrated by Abu Usama from Hisham bin Ursa from Fatima, Asma bint Abi Bakr said, 'We broke our fast during the lifetime of the Prophet on a cloudy day and then the sun appeared.' Hisham was asked, were they ordered to fast in lieu of that day? He replied, it had to be made up for. Ma'mar said, I heard Hisham saying, I don't know whether they fasted in lieu of that day or not. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 181. Narrated by A.R. Ruby bint Muawad, the Prophet sent a messenger to the village of the Ангիր in the morning of the day of Ashura, 10th of Muharram, to announce, whoever has eaten something should not eat but complete the fast, and whoever is observing the fast should complete it. She further said, since then we used to fast on that day regularly and also make our boys fast. We used to make toys of wool for the boys, and if any one of them cried for, he was given those toys till it was the time of the breaking of the fast. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 182. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet said, do not practice al-wisl, fasting continuously without breaking one's fast in the evening or eating before the following dawn. The people said to the Prophet, but you practice al-wisl. The Prophet replied, I am not like any of you, for I am given food and drink, by Allah, during the night. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 183. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's apostle forbade al-wisl. The people said, to him, but you practice it? He said, I am not like you, for I am given food and drink by Allah. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 184. Narrated by Abu Sa'id, that he had heard the Prophet saying, do not fast continuously, practice al-wisl, and if you intend to lengthen your fast, then carry it on only till the suhur, before the following dawn. The people said to him, but you practice al-wisl, O Allah's apostle. He replied, I am not similar to you, for during my sleep I have one who makes me eat and drink. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 185. Narrated by Aisha, Allah's apostle forbade al-wisl out of mercy to them. They said to him, but you practice al-wisl. He said, I am not similar to you, for my Lord gives me food and drink. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 186. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle forbade al-wisl in fasting. So, one of the Muslims said to him, but you practice al-wisl. O Allah's apostle. The Prophet replied, who amongst you is similar to me? I am given food and drink during my sleep by my Lord. So, when the people refused to stop al-wisl, fasting continuously, the Prophet fasted day and night continuously along with them for a day and then another day, and then they saw the crescent moon, of the month of Shawwal. The Prophet said to them, angrily, if it, the crescent, had not appeared, I would have made you fast for a longer period. That was as a punishment for them when they refused to stop practicing al-wisl. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 187. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said twice, O you people, be cautious. Do not practice al-wisl. The people said to him, but you practice al-wisl. The Prophet replied, my Lord gives me food and drink during my sleep. Do that much of deeds which is within your ability. Sahih Bukhari Volume 3, Book 31, Hadith number 188. Narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Allah's apostle said, do not fast continuously day and night, practice al-wisl, and if any one of you intends to fast continuously day and night, he should continue till the suhur time. They said, but you practice al-wisl, O Allah's apostle. The Prophet said, I am not similar to you, during my sleep I have one who makes me eat and drink.